So we'll try to switch over to more of a Palantir infomercial instead of Apple. Okay, I'm going to start off with a little quote here. So we recently had a training with the Marine 2nd Expeditionary Force before they deployed to Afghanistan. And one of the questions in the questionnaire post-training was, would you recommend Palantir to other service members? And I'm just going to read you a couple of their answers here. They've been excerpted. Yes, its usability far exceeds our current platforms. Great, okay. Yeah, it's very simple to use. Yes, I would recommend it. The program is far more user-friendly and easy to understand than I anticipated. It's like, this is really good. I mean, this, as someone who works on this product, I'm proud of these quotes. But we actually feel like we can do a lot better. And what I want to do is show you a little bit, a story of me as an engineer learning about these principles that Michael's just talked about and applying them to developing a new feature in Palantir. So let's take a look at Palantir as it stands right today. This is a screenshot that a sophisticated user might put together, doing some analysis on the graph, doing some searching, using some of our analysis tools. But what does it take to get to this point, right? So the project I was given was called Walk-Up Usability. Bob McGrew talked about it a little bit earlier in the session. And when I was given it, the direction was, we need the product to be more walk-up usable. That's it. You know, I've been at the company for about 4 years, which is a pretty long time in Palantir time. And the projects I've worked on have typically had a much clearer direction. You know, like we need geospatial analysis. We need a map application that can read standard vector formats and you know, put points on a map, right? It's like, you know when you've done a good job and it's ready, right? With this one, I didn't even know what they meant, right? What is this walk-up usability business? So basically, I had to sort of figure out this design thing, and I had a lot of help along the way. But the first thing I wanted to do was, well, they're talking about walk-up usability. What does a user see when they first log into the application? And this is it. It's kind of a blank slate, right? If I haven't had any training, then there's really no chance that I'm going to know what to do at this point. You know, unlike Microsoft Word, where you start up and you get a blank slate, at least you're actually trying to write on that blank slate, so that makes some sense. Here, you've got no real direction. So, you know, the training that's required to get someone to here is, you know, it takes a fair amount of time. And that's time that, you know, the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force or, you know, any of you guys don't have. And it's time that, frankly, Palantir doesn't, you know, if we can make the training burden lower, that's great for us too, right? So what I had to do as an engineer, which I wasn't really used to, was build this model that Michael's talking about for how to make decisions that will allow us to make the products more approachable. So I went into the field and I talked to users. I talked to our forward deployed engineers. I asked questions like, why do some people adopt Palantir more quickly than others? You know, how did your power users become power users? What features do people struggle with? Which features do people really like? Show me your workflow. You know, and you know, I talked to a lot of different people. Most people were really happy to speak to me, and that was great. And we ended up amassing, you know, a lot of data about this problem. So from here, we had to decide what it is we should work on. And to do that, you have to have a model for how people are going to use the application. And what we found was that when you're starting to do some analysis in Palantir or really anywhere, you have to start somewhere. And that starting place is some form of search, right? Either you're searching for a person that you're interested in, a geographic area, you know, an IP address, a phone number, whatever it is in your domain. Once you get that information, if it's, you know, Palantir works with both structured and unstructured data, and if that data comes back in the form of an unstructured document, you're going to have to tag it, because ultimately we're going to get to analysis here, and we need some structure to the data to perform this analysis. So after we've tagged it, we can get on to this analysis, which is sort of the Palantir bread and butter. We've got network analysis, geospatial analysis, temporal, the histogram, you know, and a lot of custom solutions like you've seen at your individual deployments. But ultimately, the purpose of analysis is to come up with some tidbit of information that's worthy of disseminating or reporting on, right? So the last piece of the puzzle is reporting. This might be an email to a colleague, a target information package for an operation, something like that. Whatever it is, it's deployment specific. So we call this framework STAR, right? Search, tag, analyze, report, and it's a very linear flow. But in reality, people don't necessarily work with this linear flow, right? They have what we call the workflow piece, right? If you're about to go out on a foot patrol or something like that, you may just want to do a few searches, rudimentary analysis, quick report, move on, no tagging, right? Or maybe you're at a fob and you're just doing nothing but tagging new intel reports. So you're just doing tag, tag, tag. Or hopefully you've generated some useful insight through analysis that you want to go back in the workflow and do more searching with, right? So basically you can navigate this workflow, navigate through this STAR structure in many different ways, right? So we sort of identified these as like 5 particular areas we could work on in the application to make it more walk-up usable. And the question becomes, where do you start? So we sort of narrowed it down quickly to searching and tagging, searching being the obvious one because it's the first thing in this linear flow, and tagging because it frankly takes a lot of time and it's very important in order to do the analysis that's required further down the road. We also talked about workflow and reporting, and we realized basically we want to work on all 5 of these things, and we will, but we've got to start somewhere. So how do we decide between searching, working on search and working on tagging? And this, for me as an engineer, was a very big change, right? I'm used to measuring my days and how much code I've written or how many bugs I've fixed or whatever, and stopping that process and pulling out tools like Adobe Illustrator or whatever to make mock-ups or prototypes is pretty foreign to me. But it's this thought process and learning how to be a designer as well as just an engineer. So on the left there are some prototypes for a new search interface, which ultimately is what we worked on. And on the right is some sort of prototype-y, kind of hand-wavy, a new tagging interface that we also have prototyped, which we'll hopefully work on soon. So went back into the field with these drawings, these prototypes, these mock-ups rather, and I asked people, would you prefer we work on this or that? And the response was pretty overwhelmingly for us to be working on search. So that was a pretty clear signal. Combined with it being the first thing in the STAR workflow, it made sense for us to work on it. So let's see, search. We actually do search in Palantir. We do a lot of it, in fact. We do doc search and geo search and filter search and quick search and investigation search and graph search. The problem here is that we're very quickly coming to this slide that we saw earlier. It's like, whoa, hold on, you want me to add more search capabilities? What are we going to do to ensure that we don't end up here, right? And the answer to that question is we're going to apply the thinking, this design thinking that Michael's talking about, right? We're going to ask, how does this new feature get us through this workflow? And what old features can we remove that will be supplanted by this workflow? So that was the goal, is like being cognizant of this and still adding a feature it's actually, as you'll see, you have to really think about every piece of that feature. So this is where we started, right? This is our login screen for our first-time user. And this is where we've ended up with the creation of what we call the home application. So hopefully you think, well, that looks kind of like Google, which is actually exactly what we want you to think, because Google is basically the easiest search engine to use, right? There's a single box, you can't screw it up. And what we wanted here was a single box with an orange outline around it, enter search terms. I mean, it's very clear what the call to action is here for a user who's never used Palantir before. But we also got a clear signal from people in the field that if Palantir didn't have the data necessary to do my job, then I can't use it, flat out, it's game over, right? So those icons, in fact, everything on the screen is really designed to make the user comfortable with starting to use Palantir. So these icons are meant to represent what data is available in your system, so that fear that Palantir doesn't have the data you need is gotten around, and that person proceeds with the search. The bar in the bottom, it's almost immaterial because most people won't even read that far. But it's sort of it's important in that it addresses the other end of the spectrum, who we can't abandon, right, when we're working on these features. The more established user may not want to do a search immediately. They may want to jump to a previous investigation or read their feeds, and this is that link to those things so that they can quickly get to them. So once a search is done, we get a results. Again, you saw these similar slides this morning. They're similar to Google, except the preview is a little more interactive. And there's a couple interesting things here. The results are ordered in such a way to show entities and events that have been brought into the system either through tagging or structured import, which indicates that an actual human user was interested in them, which is very important in terms of analytical value, right? And the real point there, though, is everything, every piece of this has been thought through and a decision was made, right? Like the 3 little buttons underneath the search field. You can sort of just think, well, I've seen a lot of search interfaces that have buttons all over them. What's the big deal? Well, I can tell you that we fought a lot about those buttons, right? Should you have to click the link to get to those buttons, or should they be out there? Should they be on the left side, or should they be there? And, honestly, we haven't answered all these questions. Here's a screenshot of the most recent cut of this feature from the day before I left yesterday or 2 days ago. And we're changing the color scheme. We've changed the way the thing on the left works, and the reason is very simple. We want to keep pushing the bar lower in terms of having people's understanding of the product, and we found that the interface from the previous screen was a little bit confusing on the left. And then at the bottom is our way to move the user further down that star workflow, right? We want them to take these results and drag them to the bottom and then hit that button in the lower right, which is going to take them to the folder in the browser so that they can start tagging, right? It all comes back to how does this feature fit into that model that we have developed because we've done the research talking to you guys in the field. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael, and he'll close it up.
Thank you, Dan. What I love about the star workflow is what I love about Palantir, which is when someone's sitting down and really good at using Palantir, what they're doing is really kind of a very creative process. What they're doing is they have this thought, right? This doesn't quite add up to me. I don't know what's going on. What's wrong with this piece of data here? And then they chase it, right? And everybody chases their thoughts differently, right? How am I going to go build up this thesis about this thought that I'm chasing, right? And star, it's just a model, right? It doesn't describe everything, but what it does is it kind of gives us a way to think about how people chase thoughts inside of Palantir. When you start off trying to solve a problem, I'm going to quote them the whole thing. The first solutions you come up with are very complex. Speaking as an engineer, we do this. We go and we say, oh, I've solved the problem, and I fall in love with it, right? Because I solved it, right? Most people stop there when they solve the problem. But if you keep going and you live with the problem and peel away more layers of the onion, you can often arrive at some very elegant and simple solutions. This is what we need to be doing at Palantir. This is what we've started to do with Star, and we're going to keep on pushing it. The idea is you guys are living with these hard problems, right? Again, we're not a consumer software problem. There's a huge amount of telemetry that we need to do to continue to build all of the different models to understand how we're going to do well-designed software. And we're just getting started. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully standing up here on stage with you next year, talking about all the innovative things that we've done, working with you to design better software. Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions, if you have any questions. I can't see anywhere in the back row, so someone's going to have to start talking. No? No questions? Are we good? Oh, here comes someone.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's fantastic. I was just wondering if you had put any thought into automatic tagging, using all the knowledge of how people have tagged manually to try to help that process, which I think is perhaps one of the more cumbersome parts.
Yeah, so working on the tagging piece of the Star workflow is a huge priority for us, and we have several different avenues we're going to pursue, right? As you identified, using people's existing knowledge of those tags is very valuable, and we've actually developed some back-end technologies, some machine learning algorithms that will take the knowledge that's contained in your Palantir investigation, in the whole Palantir repository, and apply that to individual pieces of document text that people are highlighting. So, a trivial example would be it could learn that an IP address consists of somewhere between 4 and 12 numbers with a number of decimal points, and it would just learn that sort of automatically, or it would learn about enumerated values for different terrorist organizations in Afghanistan or something like that. So that's one avenue, sort of the machine learning approach, and that is, well, I don't necessarily want to say when that ships or whatever, but that's something we're working on. And then the other one is, how do we actually just speed up the whole tagging workflow? And we have lots of ideas on this, and it's something I think we're going to work on soon.
Anyone else? Yeah. Here comes your mic.
From Mike.
Yes, walk-up usability, I see that that's a great idea and looks fantastic.
Thank you.
And it really, I think, from my perspective, is for, as we talked about this morning, the novice, and it's from the perspective of the novice analyst.
Yeah.
I want to know if there's any thought in taking Palantir from a UI perspective in a direction that is maybe for the unsophisticated user that's not an analyst.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things to say to that. So first of all, the home application is very customizable. So the actual results and the previews can be customized on a per type basis without getting into too many gory details. And what this means is that you could actually make a version of the application that had nothing but the home application and maybe the browser, and would pull up, let's just use a local law enforcement context. It would say, if you got an arrest, you would open the arrest, you'd see a preview, and it would be the person, the victim, the arresting officer, maybe where the arrest occurred. Everything that you really care about as someone who just needs a little bit of background information, right? Another avenue is Palantir Web, right? We do have a web version, and that we are talking about having I believe we have a REST API as well, upon which we could build, basically, you could build anything on top of a good, clean API, right? Does that sort of answer your question? Cool.
All right.
All right.
We'll be up here if you have any other questions. You don't want to stand in front of anyone and ask us questions. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Good job.